What if I told you that sexual desire, what so many people see as mere pleasure or sin, is actually a secret code the spiritual world uses to test your inner strength? Controversial, isn't it? But Nikola Tesla, the man who revolutionized science, saw this drive as much more than instinct. For him, it was a creative energy capable of generating both destruction and genius. The truth is, most people don't realize they're constantly driven by this invisible desire. How many times have you found yourself wasting hours on distractions, letting yourself be carried away by impulses that, in the end, only bring emptiness? This is the silent pain, believing you're in control, when in fact you're being manipulated by a force that knows exactly where to trap you. Now, imagine if you could transform that same desire into fuel for creativity, clarity, and spiritual power. It seems counterintuitive, but this is precisely what few people grasp. The secret lies not in denying desire, but in learning to use it as a rehearsal, an invisible training session that can elevate your life to another level. Brace yourself, because what you're about to discover here isn't just talk. It's a key that Tesla, ancient masters, and sages from various traditions knew, but that has been hidden for most. Desire isn't the enemy. It's a test. And how you respond to it can be the difference between an average life and an extraordinary one. Nikola Tesla was a man ahead of his time, and not just in the field of science. Many don't know this, but he saw sexual energy as something far beyond physical instinct. For him, this energy was a creative, almost divine force that could be directed toward great discoveries or wasted on momentary pleasures. Imagine a mighty river. If channeled, it can generate electricity. If left unchecked, it floods and destroys. The same is true of human desire. Tesla understood that much of human genius stems from how we manage this energy. While most people allow themselves to be trapped by it, chasing immediate gratification, he did the opposite. He used impulse as fuel for his mind. It's as if every wishful thought were converted into clarity for a calculation, or inspiration for an invention. He didn't repress his nature, but learned to transform it into creative power. This understanding was not exclusive to Tesla. Various spiritual masters throughout history have spoken of the same principle, sexuality as a bridge to the spirit. The Taoists called it vital energy, the Hindus spoke of phojas, and even Western alchemists saw it as the key to transmutation. Tesla simply applied this ancient wisdom to his own life, demonstrating that science and spirituality can go hand in hand when human beings know where to focus. But there's an important detail. Channeling this energy doesn't mean denying the body or becoming a hermit. Tesla didn't preach absolute denial, but rather mastery. Imagine someone playing the guitar. The loose strings make noise, but in the hands of those who know how, they produce music. The same is true of desire. The point isn't to eliminate it, but to learn to tune it so that the melody of your life isn't chaotic, but harmonious and inspiring. In practice, this means that everyone can learn to use their sexual energy constructively. Someone who has difficulty concentrating, for example, can transform this impulse into creative discipline. Writing daily, learning an instrument, or even starting a project they've always put off. The secret lies in realizing that desire isn't just physical. It's also mental, emotional, and spiritual. When directed, it opens doors to higher levels of consciousness. Tesla knew that great inventions are born from this direction. It's as if the brain receives extra fuel when sexual energy isn't dissipated excessively. He himself said that his celibacy was part of the reason for his genius, and that any deviation could have prevented him from achieving what he did. This shows that desire can be both an anchor and a springboard, depending on how you choose to handle it. It's interesting to note how today's society does the opposite. Everything is designed to stimulate and dissipate sexual energy. Advertising, entertainment, social media. The modern world has become adept at turning desire into a commodity. Tesla, on the other hand, was a silent rebel who refused to be a slave to this system. He chose to store and transmute this energy, and that's precisely where the key to his mystery lies. If we reflect on everyday life, we'll see that many frustrations stem from the misuse of this energy. How often does a person abandon their projects because they're trapped by distractions, superficial relationships, or hidden compulsions? Tesla teaches us that the same impulse that drags can also elevate. It all depends on awareness. When someone understands this, life takes on new meaning, because desire ceases to be an enemy and becomes a tool. Interestingly, this vision also invites us to rethink spirituality. Rather than seeing desire as a sin, Tesla and other sages saw it as the raw material for something greater. The question isn't, how can I avoid desire? But rather, how can I use it to my advantage? This kind of thinking opens up fertile ground for discovery not only on a personal level, but also on a collective level, because the person who masters themselves naturally becomes a leader, a guide, a role model. And, of course, when we look at this relationship between desire and creativity, we realize that every impulse is also a provocation. The universe seems to ask, will you be the master of this energy or its slave? Tesla, with his discipline and genius, chose to be the master. And it is precisely this provocation that paves the way to understanding something even deeper. Desire is not just energy, but also a test. And that's where we begin to enter the next point. Desire has always been portrayed by spiritual traditions as a testing ground. It's not about denying pleasure, but about realizing that, often, what seems harmless is actually a carefully laid trap. The spiritual world tests human beings through this impulse, verifying whether they are capable of maintaining focus on what is essential or whether they will allow themselves to be carried away by fleeting stimuli. Desire, in this sense, functions like a mirror. It reflects the degree of self-control a person possesses. Imagine a marathon. Every kilometer, there are counters full of sweets and soda, tempting and easy to consume. The runner who gives and loses pace, feels their body weighed down, and has trouble reaching the finish line. Desire acts the same way. It appears disguised as immediate pleasure, but exacts a high price in clarity, energy, and discipline. The trap isn't desire itself, but the illusion that it is the goal, when in reality it should simply be a sign of inner strength to be developed. The curious thing is that we often fail to perceive the spiritual dimension of this. When someone loses themselves in compulsions, they are not only giving in to physical impulses, but also allowing their consciousness to be fragmented. The trap sets in silently, first as a habit, then as an addiction, and finally as part of the person's identity. They begin to define themselves by what they consume, rather than by what they build. It's like exchanging a diamond for pieces of colored glass. In practical life, this manifests itself in simple ways. Hours spent watching pornography, toxic relationships maintained solely for pleasure, or even the constant use of digital distractions to fuel dopamine. All of this steals energy that could be used to create, undertake, or deepen spirituality. The trap of desire lies precisely in its disguise. It appears to give, but in reality it takes away. The promise is sweet, but the result is bitter. And when we speak of a spiritual trap, we're not exaggerating. There are forces that feed precisely on this misdirection of energy. The more a man or woman remains trapped in uncontrolled desires, the more fragile they become in the face of external influences. It's like a wall full of breaches. Just one small crack, and the entire castle crumbles. In this sense, temptation is not only biological, it's also strategic, designed to weaken human beings on their journey of evolution. A practical example is someone who seeks to meditate but cannot concentrate because their mind is always focused on images and fantasies. The trap is revealed here in all its force. The individual wants to connect with something greater, but their vital energy has already been drained before they even begin. This inability to focus shows that desire is not only a moral issue, but above all a spiritual one, as it directly interferes with the path to self-mastery and clarity. Many believe that giving in to desire is simply an innocent choice, without major consequences. However, every time someone gives away their energy without awareness, they strengthen the invisible chains that bind them. It's like a bank loan. Every uncontrolled pleasure generates a spiritual debt that will be called in sooner or later, whether in the form of anxiety, existential emptiness, or loss of vitality. The person doesn't realize it, but they're mortgaging their future for a moment of pleasure. The oldest spiritual traditions understood this clearly. It's no wonder that monks, yogis, and mystics have always placed sexual desire at the center of their disciplinary practices. Not because the body is the enemy, but because they knew that desire is the most difficult test. It stirs instinct, emotions, and the mind all at once. Taming it is like taming a wild horse. Dangerous, but once conquered, it becomes the greatest ally. Here's a practical reflection. Every time someone feels the urge to give in to desire, they can transform it into an exercise in awareness. Simply stop for a few seconds and ask yourself, does this strengthen or weaken me? Does this bring me closer to my purpose or further away from it? This simple act of questioning already begins to weaken the trap, because it restores the individual's power of choice. The real battle is not against desire, but against automatism. And it is precisely at this point that we realize how desire is not just instinct, but a spiritual force at play. It is placed before the human being as a test. Will they be seduced by illusion, or will they see beyond it? This question doesn't end there, because it opens the way to something even more challenging. When we constantly give in, it's not just the body that loses, but also the mind. This is where we enter the next point, the subjugation of consciousness. When desire is uncontrolled, it ceases to be merely a fleeting emotion and begins to enslave the mind. Consciousness, which should be awake and alert, becomes dulled, as if enveloped by a fog. The individual no longer thinks clearly, because their decisions become mediated by immediate pleasure. In this state, life loses depth, and the person becomes hostage to their most basic impulses, believing they are in control, when in fact they are guided like a puppet. Everything I'm explaining to you here, I break down more calmly in my ebook The Power of Semen Retention. It was created for those who are starting from scratch and want to know how to apply semen retention to their daily lives in a healthy way, without any crazy ideas or exaggerations. It's a practical guide, straight to the point. It's easy to identify when someone is in this condition. Observe the routine of someone who can't go a few hours without seeking stimulation, whether on social media, pornography, or fleeting pleasures. The mind doesn't rest, always searching for the next dopamine hit. This is the subjugation of consciousness, an invisible prison where the bars are built by habit itself. The body may seem free, but the spirit is shackled. The most dangerous thing is that people believe they're living intensely. They confuse freedom with addiction, pleasure with satisfaction, desire with love. The brain, doped with stimuli, creates the illusion that it's in control, when in fact it's a hostage. It's like a prisoner who paints flowers on the cell walls, believing it's a garden. The subjugated consciousness loses the ability to discern what's truly true. This enslavement doesn't happen all at once, but in small doses. Each time someone gives in without question, a piece of their lucidity is lost. At first, the habit seems harmless. Then, it becomes routine. And finally, it becomes addiction. The individual comes to believe they can't live without that specific pleasure. This is the height of subjugation, when desire dictates life, and consciousness merely obeys. In everyday life, this manifests itself in subtle ways. Constant procrastination, difficulty focusing on studies or work, and unprovoked emotional outbursts. All of this stems from the energy drained by the tyranny of desire. The mind no longer responds to the will's command, but to the call of addiction. It's like a car with a locked steering wheel. No matter where you want to go, you always end up at the same destination. It's important to understand that this domination isn't just psychological, but also spiritual. A subjugated consciousness can't see reality beyond the immediate. It loses the broader vision that connects the human being to a greater purpose. Thus, the person ceases to be a protagonist and becomes a supporting character in their own story. They live, but don't awaken. They walk, but don't know where they're going. Practical examples abound. A student who dreams of passing a public exam but spends nights overstimulated, arriving exhausted from studying. A talented professional who could start a business but wastes their energy on fleeting pleasures, never manages to take the first step. These are lives that could be great, but remain mediocre because their consciousness has been taken away. Desire has robbed them of the strength to achieve. There's also a collective side to this. When many people live subjugated, an entire society becomes fragile. Governments, media, and large corporations know this and exploit human weakness. By keeping the masses entertained by desire, they are free to manipulate, impose ideas, and dictate behavior. It's modern slavery, not with iron chains, but with invisible chains of uncontrolled pleasure. However, there is always a way out. Consciousness can be regained, but it requires discipline and self-knowledge. Practices such as meditation, reading good books, or even the simple act of writing in a journal help restore clarity. When individuals learn to observe their own impulses, they realize they don't need to submit to them. This is the first step toward breaking the invisible prison that desire has built. And it is precisely at this point that the provocation arises. If every impulse of desire can enslave, couldn't it also be used as a rehearsal, a test? Perhaps desire, beyond being a prison, is also an opportunity to demonstrate strength. This reflection paves the way for understanding the next aspect, desire as a rehearsal of the spiritual world. Each impulse of desire doesn't arise by chance. It functions as a kind of rehearsal from the spiritual world, a silent test to determine the extent to which a person controls themselves. It's as if each thought, each temptation, were an invisible question posed to the human heart. Will you be the master of your energy or its slave? This examination happens constantly, and almost no one notices. The curious thing is that these trials don't just occur in grand moments, but especially in everyday life. Desire appears disguised in small choices: binge eating, giving in to distractions, seeking quick pleasures instead of building something lasting. Every time someone responds to these stimuli, they are rehearsing their own ability to govern life. Those who fail the small tests rarely hold up in the face of the big ones. Spiritual traditions have always taught this. Masters didn't put their disciples through trials simply to punish them, but to reveal their readiness. Likewise, the spiritual world doesn't judge desire as something wrong in itself, but observes how each person deals with it. It is through rehearsal that it reveals who has discipline and who still needs to mature. Desire is, therefore, an invisible classroom. Think of a musician training for a big performance. Before taking the stage, they rehearse countless times, repeating every note, testing every detail. Desire does something similar to us. It forces us to constantly rehearse so that when the real test comes, a great challenge, a great temptation, we're prepared. Those who don't take advantage of rehearsals end up out of tune at the decisive moment. It is in this sense that each impulse should be seen not as an enemy, but as an opportunity. When feeling the desire arise, one can ask oneself, how will I respond to this essay? This simple shift in perspective transforms temptation into an exercise in awareness. Suddenly, what seemed like a distraction becomes a stepping stone to inner growth. Practical examples abound. A man who feels the desire to waste hours on virtual pleasures can transform that impulse into the strength to create something. Write a book, start a business, learn a skill. The energy is the same. What changes is how he responds to the experiment. Instead of losing himself, he rehearses his own victory. This is the key that separates those who advance from those who remain stuck. The interesting thing is that the more a person shows themselves to be steadfast in their trials, the more the spiritual world confronts them with greater challenges. It's as if life is saying, "You've already won at this level, now let's see what happens next." This continuous cycle builds maturity and strengthens consciousness. Those who understand this no longer see desire as a curse, but as a training opportunity. However, there's also a flip side. Those who repeatedly fail tests become predictable, easy to manipulate. The spiritual world knows it can always be tested in the same way, because the result will be the same. It's like a student who never studies. They fail every test and repeat the year. This stagnation is dangerous, because life doesn't forgive a lack of evolution. Therefore, each desire should be seen as a call to practice one's own discipline. It's not about always winning, but about training, learning, and growing. The problem isn't falling, but refusing to recognize the value of practicing. When one sees desire as part of learning, one discovers that even failures have a purpose. Spiritual practice doesn't seek perfection, but awareness. And it's precisely this awareness that paves the way for the next point. Because, if it's possible to transform desire into rehearsal, it's also possible to go a step further, using this energy as raw material for something greater. And that's where we enter the hidden secret of sexual transmutation. Few understand that sexual energy is not only biological, but above all creative. It is the same force that can generate life, but it can also give rise to ideas, projects, and masterpieces. Sexual transmutation is exactly that, the conscious act of harnessing the impulse of desire and converting it into inspiration, discipline, and productivity. It's like turning coal into diamonds, using pressure and direction. Nikola Tesla, like other geniuses, knew this secret. He didn't see abstinence as repression, but as a method of honing his mind. Instead of wasting his energy on excesses, he channeled it into inventions and discoveries that changed the world. This process wasn't just mystical, it was practical. Mental clarity, focus, and intuition grew as he maintained his vital energy. The beauty of transmutation is that anyone can practice it, not just geniuses. For example, when someone feels the urge of desire, they can choose to write, train, meditate, or even study something new. This immediate redirection transforms the fire of instinct into fuel for the mind. Gradually, the person discovers that what once enslaved them begins to empower them. A simple example. Imagine someone who feels desire and decides to transform that energy into physical training. Each set of exercises becomes more intense, as if driven by an extra force. Another decides to use the same energy to create music, paint, or start a business. The secret is not to stifle desire, but to give it a noble channel of expression. It's the conscious practice of transmutation. The ancient masters already knew this. Alchemists called it the art of transmutation, Taoists worked on the circulation of sexual energy throughout the body, and yogis spoke of raising this force along the spine, awakening higher centers of consciousness. Tesla was just one of those who discovered that this energy, when directed, opens doors to genius. The crucial point is to understand that it's not about denying sexuality, but about sublimating it. Those who try to repress desire end up becoming ill, as they create an internal conflict. Transmutation isn't repression, it's transformation. It's like taking the water that threatens to flood and using it to turn a turbine. The energy doesn't disappear, but is converted into something useful and powerful. In practice, one of the simplest ways to get started is focused meditation. When you feel the urge, instead of giving in, you breathe deeply, close your eyes, and imagine that energy rising up your spine to your head. You can then direct it toward a creative or intellectual activity. This simple exercise already changes how the brain responds to the impulse. Another way is to adopt habits that naturally channel energy, such as high-performance sports, the arts, or entrepreneurship. Great athletes and businesspeople, often unfamiliar with the term transmutation, already practice this. They notice that periods of sexual discipline coincide with moments of greater clarity, focus, and productivity. It's no coincidence, it's the science of the spirit in action. The result is a feeling of inner power that's hard to explain. Those who practice transmutation feel more in control, more connected to life, and more creative. It's as if a flame that previously burned uncontrollably now illuminates the path. This shift not only strengthens the individual but also inspires those around them. And it is precisely here that the inevitable question arises. If energy can be transmuted into creative force, what happens when it is dissipated without control? This is where we encounter the silent danger of the dissipation of vital energy. When sexual energy is excessively wasted, the price paid goes far beyond the body. It's like constantly draining a cell phone battery without ever having time to charge it. The result is fatigue, apathy, and a seemingly endless void. This dissipation creates an inner abyss, robbing us of vitality that could be used to achieve goals, strengthen the mind, and deepen spirituality. The greatest danger is that this wear and tear doesn't happen immediately, but gradually. The individual believes they're fine, until they realize they no longer have the same clarity or the same energy to build something lasting. It's like a candle that slowly burns out. The flame seems steady, but each waste steals hours of light. Thus, the person ages inside long before their time. A practical example. Someone who constantly indulges in momentary pleasures begins to notice a decline in performance, concentration, and even mood. Small signs of anxiety, lack of motivation, and lack of creativity are the first warning signs that vital energy is being drained. But because desire offers quick pleasure, the person continues, unaware that they are digging their own hole. Modern science already recognizes this. Research shows that excessive sexual stimulation consumes essential neurotransmitters, leaving the brain exhausted. The result is the need for ever-increasing doses to feel the same satisfaction. This explains why many become trapped in cycles of compulsion. It's the dissipation of energy transformed into chemical and emotional dependence. In the spiritual realm, the consequences are even more serious. Sexual energy is the basis of human vitality, and when dissipated, it leaves the soul vulnerable. It's like a fortress without soldiers. Any wind can topple it, any external influence can overwhelm it. People in this condition feel fragile, lacking willpower, trapped in an existential void that's difficult to explain. This exhaustion affects all areas of life. Relationships become superficial, careers lose their luster, and health weakens. The body craves rest, the mind craves direction, but the person no longer finds the strength. It's as if life has become a leaky bucket. No matter how hard you try to fill it, it will always be empty. The contrast is clear when compared to those who conserve this energy. Men and women who practice retention or transmutation seem to have a distinct glow, a vitality that makes them magnetic. Those who constantly dissipate energy show visible signs of fatigue and loss of vigor. Their faces betray it, their posture betrays it, even their gaze betrays it. A simple exercise to understand this is to observe yourself after a period of waste and after a period of retention. In the first case, there is discouragement, a clouded mind, and a heavy body. In the second, there is clarity, focus, and a willingness to face challenges. This difference is living proof of the power of vital energy and the risk involved in wasting it. And when we think about society, the picture is even more worrying. An entire generation, learning to dissipate its energy in instant pleasures, becomes weak, manipulable, and incapable of creating anything great. This is exactly what many occult forces desire, to keep humanity weakened by wasting what should be its greatest strength. And it is precisely at this point that an even darker aspect reveals itself. Desire, when misdirected, not only steals energy but can be used as a tool of spiritual manipulation. And that's what we'll explore next. Desire is one of the most powerful tools for manipulating human beings. Hidden forces, whether social, political, or spiritual, know this and masterfully exploit this weakness. Just observe, almost all advertising appeals, directly or indirectly, to desire. Whether through sensuality, status, or the promise of quick pleasure, the intention is always the same: to capture attention and trap consciousness in a cycle of consumption. In the spiritual realm, this is no different. There are entities that feed on dissipated vital energy, and therefore silently encourage humanity to lose itself in compulsions. It's as if there were an invisible web that keeps millions of people trapped in immediate pleasures, unaware that they are weakening their inner sovereignty. The more desire controls, the easier it is to control the masses like puppets. A clear example is the entertainment industry. Films, series, music, and social media often exploit sexual triggers to keep people connected, often without realizing it. What appears to be mere entertainment is actually a subtle conditioning process. The more we consume, the less energy we have left to create, reflect, and question. The manipulation isn't just economic, but above all spiritual. This trap also manifests itself in relationships. How many people remain in toxic relationships simply because of desire? They confuse pleasure with love and accept abuse in exchange for fleeting moments of satisfaction. This type of manipulation slowly erodes self-esteem, preventing a person from growing. It's like a gilded cage, beautiful on the outside, but imprisoning on the inside. The most delicate point is that manipulation by desire is not consciously perceived. The person believes they are choosing, but in fact, they are reacting to programmed stimuli. It's as if they are hypnotized by their own desires, without realizing that these desires have been induced. This is the most dangerous form of slavery, the one in which the prisoner doesn't realize they are trapped. And when we talk about spiritual forces, the game goes even deeper. Many ancient teachings spoke of entities that grow stronger from misdirected sexual energy. By constantly dissipating this force, the individual becomes an energetic feast. It's not a conspiracy theory, it's wisdom repeated across cultures. Those who don't control their desire become governed by something external. A practical example of this manipulation is the excess of pornography in the digital age. Access to it has never been so easy, and so many men have never been weakened by it. This is no coincidence. By keeping millions of people trapped in this habit, society becomes more docile, more controllable, and less creative. It is spiritual manipulation operating under the guise of entertainment. On the other hand, when someone understands this mechanism, they begin to see life differently. They discover that each stimulus is not just a pleasure, but also an invitation to slavery or freedom. This awakening is liberating, as it restores the individual's sovereignty over themselves. They cease to be manipulated and begin to consciously choose how to use their energy. This process requires courage, because it goes against the grain of the majority. Society expects everyone to give in to desire, as this makes it easier to control. But when someone decides to swim against the current, they become a rare and magnetic force. It is at this point that a new energy emerges, a clarity that allows us to see beyond the illusions created to imprison us. And here's the detail that connects everything to the next step. If desire can be manipulated and used as a weapon of domination, it can also be overcome and converted into a tool of liberation. This is precisely where the true path to inner freedom begins. Desire can imprison, but it can also be the gateway to freedom. The path to liberation begins when the individual recognizes that sexual energy need not be an enemy, but an ally. Instead of getting lost in automatic impulses, they learn to observe, question, and redirect each impulse. This simple act of awareness is the first building block in the construction of a sovereign life, where the human being becomes master of themselves. Discipline is the key that opens this door. Many believe that discipline is synonymous with rigidity, but in reality, it's the highest form of self-love. When someone decides to control their desire, they're telling themselves, "I'm worth more than momentary pleasure." This attitude strengthens self-esteem and creates a solid foundation for any achievement. Without discipline, every purpose is shattered at the first temptation. Self-knowledge is another fundamental pillar. You can only overcome what you know. By observing your own patterns, you discover what triggers you to give in and what strategies work to resist. This process can include practices like journaling, daily meditation, or even seeking support in growth groups. Each step in this direction is a victory against the invisible currents of desire. Retaining sexual energy then emerges as a powerful tool on this path. It's not just about abstaining, but about redirecting. Each time someone manages to conserve their energy, they open space for it to transform into mental clarity, physical vitality, and spiritual depth. It's like saving seeds. Instead of throwing them to the wind, they plant them in fertile soil, and the fruits multiply. A practical example is using this accumulated energy in creative projects. Many men report that, after a few weeks of retention, they can write more, train more intensely, or even undertake projects with greater courage. This is because the energy that was previously dissipated begins to overflow into other areas of life. This liberation is not only spiritual but also practical, as it transforms dreams into achievements. Of course, the path isn't easy. Desire will keep knocking at the door, and there will be moments of failure. But every time a person gets up and chooses discipline again, their awareness grows stronger. Liberation doesn't come from perfection, but from persistence. Those who insist on getting back up gradually discover that they are stronger than they imagined. The curious thing is that this personal journey ends up inspiring others. The man or woman who achieves self-mastery emits a different, magnetic presence. There's no need to say much, just be there. Others perceive the energy, confidence, and clarity they radiate. This is the true power of liberation, transforming not only one's own life, but also the environment around them. Spiritual practices complement this process. Meditation, prayer, breathing exercises, and even martial arts can help channel energy. These are not dogmas, but tools. Each practice strengthens the individual, making them more aware of their inner strength. It is at this point that one realizes, liberation does not come from outside, but always from within. The most beautiful thing of all is that liberation doesn't mean the absence of desire, but mastery over it. The impulse continues to exist, but it no longer dictates life. It becomes an ally, a constant reminder that there is energy available to be used wisely. This state of balance is what differentiates the slave from the master, the lost from the awakened. And that's precisely where the great revelation lies. Sexual desire, which so many see as a curse, is actually an invisible test. Tesla knew this, the ancient masters knew this. The question is, are we ready to see desire not as a prison, but as an opportunity for liberation? This reflection opens the perfect space for the introduction we're about to create. Now that you've come this far, you need to ask yourself, will you continue to be a slave to your impulses, or will you choose to transform this energy into creative force? Desire is within us all, but how we manage it determines whether we will be guided by mediocrity or greatness. Tesla chose to channel his energy into changing the world. And you, what will you use it for? Stop for a moment and reflect. How many projects have been abandoned because you let desire dictate your choices? How many times has your energy been wasted on fleeting pleasures and could have built something lasting? This is the challenge I leave you with. Don't waste your life on pennies when you can invest in the gold of self-mastery. And what's more, what would your life be like if, starting today, you learn to use every impulse of desire as a spiritual rehearsal? The more conscious you are, the freer you will be. The key is already in your hands. The question is, will you use it? Write in the comments, what was the biggest insight you gained from this content? I want to hear your perspective, because this exchange strengthens our journey. Share your experience, because it might be exactly what someone else needs to hear to change their life. And of course, if this content resonated with you, please like, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications. Here you'll continue to learn secrets few reveal about energy, spirituality, and self-mastery. Desire is a test, but you don't have to face it alone. We're in this journey together.